Welcome back to the Green Lectionary Podcast, a conversation on Scripture through the lens of creation justice. My name is Derek Weston, and today we will be looking at a text for the final week of the season of creation. The season of creation is observed from September 1st to October 4th, and is celebrated across the globe as a time to reconnect to God by reconnecting with creation. My guest today is Dr. Garrett Andrew, a homiletician and author. You can find his recent writings series, Mark for the Margins, at garrettjandrew.substack.com. In partnership and support from national and local partners, CJM has held a series of Faithful Witness events across the country to highlight threats to the environment, while calling on the U.S. government to have moral courage in promoting a right relationship and peace with creation. Our final event will happen in Washington, D.C. on September 29th. You can find more information at creationjustice.org/witness for creation. Join us now as we look at Jeremiah 32 through the lens of creation justice. All right, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Garrett Andrew. I have a doctorate in preaching and love the Bible, love what it gets to do. I'm not currently a weekly preacher, but still working on right now a commentary that anybody might grab off right now Substack. And I have a Substack, Garrett J. Andrew, on Mark on the Margins, trying to go through the Gospel of Mark and discovering how it actually speaks to those who are on the margins of society if we try to get it most in its original intent and try to figure out what Mark or whoever wrote Mark was trying to do. And I'm having a blast with that. The nicest thing about having left the church, Derek, for me at least, is I am unbounded by theological chains that have attempted to keep me locked away. And now I have this freedom that is a stunning gift. But so working on those things while doing all sorts of other stuff in life now.
I love that. I love that. Why Mark and why now?
Oh, that's a great question. Mark is my favorite gospel. It's stunning. I love how short it is. If you think about, well, I mean, 16 and with Mark's and immediately. And so you have these nuggets. And once I left the Presbyterian Church USA, I had a group of people who sat down with me and asked if I would continue doing something. And I finally asked them why. I'm not a pastor anymore. Why are you sitting with me and want this? And they said, basically, at least those who spoke for themselves, we experience God through you. And we want that. And I've always wanted just to go through Mark with people because it's the shortest gospel. I think it's stunningly brilliant, not just in its simplicity, but its motifs, its symbolism, the way that Mark kind of pauses things. So you have the temptations after the baptism with none of the explanation of what the Satan is doing there in terms of the temptations, because those temptations show up throughout the ministry of Jesus over and over again. Last week I was doing Peter's mother-in-law being essentially it's the first resurrection in Mark, and it's also on the Sabbath. And while we know the first two miracles are on the Sabbath, it's not that kind of like, wait, you're healing on the Sabbath. That becomes in chapter 2, but Jesus starts it right away. And the whole Sabbath narrative in Mark that is being done is essentially turning the Sabbath into the Jubilee of Leviticus 25. And we fail to see that. And the joy of even Peter's mother-in-law being raised, he goes, he grabs her hand. It's the one time in Mark where the very forceful grabbing of the hand is not a control trying to grab someone and force them into something, but the giving of power. So you the way Mark uses unclean spirits every time he's talking about a synagogue instead of the demonic, as if the unclean and the clean is still at war within the religious structure. Again, Peter's mother-in-law is raised to serve, which is the very point, and it's that verb from which we get deacon, is the very point of it, and the disciples themselves never understand. And by the time Jesus runs off and the disciples are hunting for him, and as soon as they're like, everyone's looking for you, it's like, we're going away. He refuses to be defined by anything except the movement toward the cross. And that is unique to Mark. And there's this brilliant way in Mark where in chapter 8, when Jesus takes his disciples to the first of two urban centers that he ever takes them to, Caesarea Philippi, which is the ancient place where the cult of Caesar was, and it was also the red light district of the ancient world. And he takes them there to ask them, who do you say that I am? Then he immediately silences them and then proceeds to have the second half of the whole book move toward Jerusalem and death. And they never get it. So there's this scene right afterward where he has to heal a blind guy, and it takes twice. And they keep arguing about who's the greatest, because the idea in Mark is they are partially blind. And then right before he goes into Jerusalem, he encounters this guy, and it's only in Mark's gospel. And in our translations, it says Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. But in the original Greek, it is Bartimei, son of Timaeus, which is a big difference, because Bartimei in Hebrew means son of the unclean, and Bartimaeus in Greek means son of the honored. And so this idea of whether being unclean or honored, great or servant, is all kind of brought together in Bartimaeus, who finally cedes and immediately follows Jesus along the way. And the very next chapter is the entrance into Jerusalem, where someone is following and seeing what's actually going on. It's just, it's Matthew and Luke try to make it better, and John is on mushrooms, and Mark is just like, yeah, we're gonna do this. And Mark is the one that still has the most kind of open ways to discover a Christ who is amazing. Yeah. That was long-winded. I hope you can edit that.
No, that's it's good. Like, I want people to have a taste of what it is like to read and to get inside of your head a little bit, because I for one find it fascinating. And so I will put the link for your Substack in the show notes. But let's shift gears to Jeremiah. We have been looking at Jeremiah through the season of creation, and today we are reading Jeremiah chapter 32, verses 1 to 3 and 6 to 15. The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord in the 10th year of King Zedekiah of Judah, which was the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar. At that time, the army of the king of Babylon was besieging Jerusalem, and the prophet Jeremiah was confined in the court of the guard that was in the palace of the king of Judah, where King Zedekiah of Judah had confined him. Jeremiah said, "The word of the Lord came to me. Hanamel, son of your uncle Shallum, is going to come to you and say, 'Buy my field that is in Anathoth, for the right of redemption by purchase is yours.' Then my cousin Hanamel came to me in the court of the guard, in accordance with the word of the Lord, and said to me, 'Buy my field that is at Anathoth, in the land of Benjamin, for the right of possession and redemption is yours. Buy it for yourself.' Then I knew that this was the word of the Lord. And I bought the field at Anathoth from my cousin Hanamel, and weighed out the silver to him, 17 shekels of silver. I signed the deed, sealed it, got witnesses, and weighed the silver on scales. Then I took the sealed deed of purchase containing the terms and conditions and the open copy, and I gave the deed of purchase to Baruch, son of Neriah, son of Messiah, in the presence of my cousin Hanamel, and the presence of the witnesses who signed the deed of purchase, in the presence of all the Judeans who were sitting in the court of the guard. In their presence I charged Baruch, saying, 'Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, take these deeds, both the sealed deed of purchase and this open deed, and put them in an earthenware jar, in order that they may last for a long time. For thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, houses and fields and vineyards shall again be bought in this land.'"
Is a stunning passage.
So where is creation in this text?
Well, I mean, land first and foremost. I mean, we got to start there, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the beauty of it. Like, this is all about hope and restoration, even in judgment, but it's a hope and restoration that literally none of them can see.
Mm.
Based off the timeline that is given in Jeremiah, there we know that the siege will be over within a year. Jerusalem will be destroyed. Ananoth, where he is buying land, is certainly destroyed. It's about 5 miles from Jerusalem. It's a priestly city. It's where Jeremiah was born. He's buying land again that is his right to buy from the Levitical laws that way. And the idea of buying land right then is perhaps the most absurd thing that anybody could do. It'd be like me going to Grover Beach right before some kind of tsunami is supposed to go through everything and trying to convince somebody to buy coastal property.
Mm.
It's the sheer absurdity, and especially for Christianity in a Christianity at our current times that is focusing more on the pie in the sky. So we're right after this whole Charlie Kirk business that I have refused to comment on in any kind of way. And by the way, I saw what you had written, and that was brilliant. And I was grateful for the clarity and the pastoral way with which you did it. But you see people who are like, "Oh, it's the pie in the sky." I mean, we're in heaven. We're all trying to get there. And there is no part of this passage that is trying to point us to the pie in the sky. Like, I mean, where to start? Obviously, the land. And for me, too, this is all war and siege. And if we're going to talk about ecological justice, how much ecological damage do we do by war and siege still? How much damage is being done to water systems? And if we think of the Babylonian kind of siege, what did they do to all the fields? How long did they lie fallow? How long were the water systems absolutely destroyed? How long were the species displaced from wherever they were? It wasn't just the damage done to a people's cultural sensibilities. It was a complete destruction of the ecological order of Judea. And that is a fascinating piece with which to do. And notice a couple of other, and Derek, feel free, let's make this a conversation.
No, keep going, keep going.
So Jeremiah is a prophet, and he's locked up in Jerusalem because the king Zedekiah is already tired of him saying all the bad prophecies. Doesn't that sound like anybody right now who speaks some kind of clarity about the issues going on with not just our societies, but the overall environment? What we're doing to think nobody, like, we can talk about it and the leadership gets mad at us, like, why are you talking about these things? And then they want to shut us up, and who knows? I mean, lock us up as things might keep going. And we talk about how afraid we are. And here's Jeremiah while the proverbial stuff is hitting the fan and it's flying all over, and he is still prophesying the way that he needs to prophesy. What kind of gift is this to anyone who is called by the God of the universe to proclaim the gospel of Jesus, who is the Christ, or any of this God? And he does it publicly. What kind of public witness do we still have? He does it in the face of people who want to shut him up. They don't even know what he's doing because it is an eschatological hope that is geared in the land. The land is being saved. There's not a thing about the land with which the people can be separate from the land. The covenant that God has bestowed upon those people was always tied to a place that was important and allowed them to continually thrive and receive things. He rips apart greed in the wholeness of his prophecy. But if we're focusing on this piece, I think it's just advantageous to be aware that in a very similar way, we are at siege as a society. I live in California. Right now, it's raining all day today in California in September. I'm not used to that. It's humid, like it's 6 something in the morning from these things, and yet we've had wildfires that weren't far from my house that destroyed nearly 200,000 acres. We had a plume of smoke. There was a couple of days we could not see the sun. That was a month ago. And we're at siege from all sorts of things. The water quality in San Luis Obispo County has been poor enough to necessitate that people have been boiling their water in some of my communities just to be able to drink. Our foodways are going away. Things are difficult. We have no idea what to do. And meanwhile, our leadership is keeping the head in the sand while all of it's going around, having no idea that very soon it will all go away. And for those of us who've been trying to make sure it doesn't all go away, this is a passage that says, no, it will. But you are still living into a future hope that is geared around the tangible, the land that will be redeemed, that will be resurrected, that God says will come back. But is Jeremiah ever going to live in that place that he bought in the land of his birth? Which, by the way, like Ananoth can be, some people think that it's a city named after the goddess Anoth, I believe. And others say it means prayer, and others say that it means, if it's not prayer, it's, what is it? I'm blanking. Help me out, Derek. You should know this.
Why should I know this?
I don't know. Don't we all know these things? It's gonna bother me until I remember. But anyhow, so basically, I think one of the most important pieces for me right away is the land is a covenant partner. It's not a commodity. Yeah. He's not buying real estate. This isn't an economic space. It's a liturgical act. It's a prophetic liturgical act. And notice that it's not a ritual that we do weekly in our services. It's a brand new liturgical act in the front of everybody. It's a reaffirmation of God's bond with the land itself. In this prophetic act, in this creation preaching that Jeremiah is doing, the land is not disposable. Even in exile and even in siege and even in destruction, God's future, as imagined and received by Jeremiah, involves a restored land he will never see, but he must live into. And if we are beginning to look at the siege and ponder if there is any way out of it, and maybe more of us are thinking there's not, we still have to live into a hope for a future better than ours, even if we won't see it. It's like that in various assorted spiritualities, where I've heard the similar quote of, a truly wise person is someone who plants a tree knowing that they will never be able to sit under its shade. And we almost have to begin doing that. And I think this involves that, this thing. And the way that the liturgical act works, he plants a seed. He literally buries the deed in clay, in earthen vessel that is both fragile and yet can keep the promise safe. It's not stone, it's not iron, it's earth. It's earth that this thing is surrounded in. So you have this strange sense of the fragility and the longness of, like, it sounds like the way that God works, not with the
Mhm.
wah wah wah, but more with the undercurrent of grace that we rarely see.
Mm.
And so this prophetic hope is a soil work. He's planting the seed. The act of faith is in the soil. It's a belief that the ground will once again yield food and homes and vineyards. And notice that it's the people tied to the land. Well, do you ever go back to like where you were raised and immediately you kind of feel a kinship to like the landscape or the soil or anything like that? Is it okay?
Yeah,
Good. That's not just me.
absolutely. No, no, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. Even though it's changed quite a bit, absolutely, I still feel it.
Well, yeah, like I go back home, and my dad's a landscaper. Um, and so I've always I grew up with the land, which anybody who knows me would be mildly surprised because, like, again, I have the softest hands of any woman I've ever dated. And people are like, do you like outdoors? And I've told people Staples is my Bass Pro Shop because I'm an indoorsman. And but I have this father who can create Edens out of deserts. And but whenever I go back to Riverside, and I'm California where I was raised, and I'm driving through the freeways of Southern California that make anybody who's mildly sane wish they were somewhere else. And but I get to Riverside, and my parents, they built this house when I was a kid that overlooks like this valley from basically Ontario to Palm Springs with the San Bernardino Mountains way off in the background. And I get into the hills of that region where I used to hike as a child, and I get to the soil, and it still feels like home.
Mm.
Like I'm kind of a rootless tree. My kids are their favorite homes are my parents' home where I grew up and my wife's parents' home where she grew up because they were born in Georgia, ripped out of Georgia, moved to Northern California, ripped out of Northern California. They've never had a soil.
Mm.
So even my children, their soil is where Melinda and I were raised. Like they sense that. And
Mm.
here we have Jeremiah. Like, how many of us, even when we read Jeremiah 32, remember, oh yeah, he was born in Antioch. That's where he was from. Like he's buying land that was his land. And I'm imagine his cousin must have been like, "Hey, dude, I have a terrible deal for you, but maybe you'll take it because you're crazy." And he's trying to get out of it, but it becomes this moment where, and anybody in the court must have been thinking, what is this guy doing? And like prepare it. And you have Baruch there who's writing all of it down dutifully, and you have Zedekiah who's like, what must be happening? And all, but it's just Jeremiah with any means at his disposal demonstrating in the midst of things that do not seem to have any kind of way out. There doesn't seem to be a door open, a window cracked, a light in the far off distance to go to. Instead, he buries it. And so, what do we still need to bury? Uh, as I think of liturgical acts too, or even ways that people are doing this. I know in California there are seed banks of people who are saving the seed. Yeah, and this is not just California. And so after these wildfires, sometimes people have been saving these seeds now to go replant what has been destroyed with the local varieties of plants that have already been kind of ruined. And that is an incredible hope. Um, there is a very small indigenous tribe of people, First Peoples here in California, who were essentially considered to be extinguished, I believe, sometime in the late 1800s. And they're a very small tribe. I don't remember the name, but it's somewhere in Monterey County. And they have repurchased like ranches that had been essentially used by colonial powers initially, or then Americans. rich people, and they have been able to repurchase these places and try to bring back their own people in the lands. And if you were to tell them hundreds of years ago that that would even be possible, they would have looked at you like, we're nearly extinguished in the face of a power that couldn't care about us at all. And now, while I can't remember the name off the top of my head, they are doing things that are bringing it back, and it's tied to the land. I think uh, that this is the opposite kind of theology that we hear in most of our churches today.
Mm.
There are so many people who are concerned about salvation that we forget that every time in the New Testament you see the word salvation, you can translate it liberation. And so we're pointing people to the pie in the sky so that they don't worry about the earth. And here is Jeremiah, who is primarily worried about the earth so there can be a future, while those who don't even have a concept necessarily of the pie in the sky are terrified. It's true propheticness going on here. And then that's just land. And you can talk about all the ways of things with the earthly futures, the communal witness, the pub. I could maybe we should gear ourselves here a little bit, Derek, before I haven't taken my meds yet. So.
Well, I mean, you've already, I mean, you've given people a sermon already, but let's shift a little bit, because I question one and question two, our normal question one and question two are really interrelated here. It's where's creation in the passage, and where are we called to interact with creation in the passage? And this is, and you've talked about this already. This is about the land. This is about an interaction with the land. And this is what's really helpful that you've brought up is that the language here, the English here, makes us think of this as a real estate deal. It makes us think of this as a Western real estate deal of I am buying property. This is more like what you just described with that indigenous group of reclaiming an ancestral land and reclaiming an ancestral stewardship of the land. This is not a real estate deal. This is Jeremiah saying the land that was once my family's um, ancestral heritage that we stewarded, this land that we cared for, this land that we had fields, we had vineyards, we had homes, that we were in mutual relationship with. I'm going to reestablish that relationship. I might not be around to see that relationship flourish, but I want to reestablish that ancestral relationship with the land. In the midst of the siege, in the midst of the calamity, in the midst of the disaster, is the reestablishing in hope and in faith of the relationship with the land. And that is, oh my God, the thing that we need to hear right now.
Oh,
The thing that we need to be about right now.
yeah, because it focuses Jeremiah, it focuses us, and in the midst of it, not just being this faith and this part toward God, this is also a legal arrangement. So he's being prophetic, and it's not a prophetic like victory, but in the midst of chaos, is you have to keep saying it's almost like if you make this, you have to give the listeners of your sermon a sense of what the siege was like, what it was like to be besieged, how the collapse was feeling, the fear of these things. Because sometimes we have to remember that people 2,800 years ago, or 2,500, 2,600 years ago, I guess, weren't that different in some ways. But there's something about the legality of it here too. Like it's prophetic, it's liturgical, it's hope in the future, but these are legal documents that he forces everybody to see. Like the preservation is got the legal piece, the spiritual piece, and together it is the spiritual work. And so it reminds us that not only is it not a real estate speculation, which is, of course, how we think of land now, because we've commodified everything, but the land, again, here, especially in the Old Testament theology, is a covenant partner.
Mm.
And this covenant partner is the one that allows the human beings, the Adams, to go back to the Adama. I mean, every ancient language still gets its way of what a human being is from its word for soil and earth. It knows that connection, and we are more disconnected. And in that legal way, Jeremiah is still embodying that connection. And so this passage reminds us that the land isn't passive. The land has its own flourishing. And yes, we have a vocational obligation and responsibility, not just to think of ourselves as stewards of the land, but as partners with the land. Because until we think of ourselves as partners with the land, we will always think of ourselves over and above it.
That's right.
And yeah, like, I mean, we're not just stewards, and as stewards, we have sucked. So it's maybe
Yeah.
it's time we realize we're more like children of the land,
That's better.
and we
that's
need
better.
to take care of our parents.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard not to, for me anyway, hearing this besieging language of a people under siege and not immediately go to Gaza and not immediately think about we have a very live, very active image in our world today of what it means to be under siege. And to think of to imagine a Palestinian um, being able to recapture a piece of land
Mm.
in Palestine and say I'm gonna plant something here right now. Like that feels like right now when you have the leaders of Israel talking about the real estate boom that's going to happen there, that feels absolutely ridiculous. Um, and that's what's happening with Jeremiah here.
And isn't
It's
it fascinating that we can take something from 2,600 years ago and immediately apply it to the same area of the world and find that it speaks?
yeah, yeah, and find that the people for whom this is their text um, are repeating things that happened to them, and it's uncomfortable to talk about, and yet we have to talk about it. We have to talk about the fact that that land means something, and that displacing people from land means something, and people desiring to have their own land and have a relationship with land, that means something. Um,
Okay,
yeah,
I remember real quick that Ananoth might mean affliction as well. Like Bethany can mean house of affliction or house of prayer, and Ananoth can have this idea of prayer answers or affliction. And the only reason I just finally remembered it as you speak of Palestine there is here we are with this kind of dichotomy. Is it answered prayers or is it affliction?
yeah,
Why can you play with both in Hebrew as if that's the, and again, he's buying a land that has a double meaning even.
yeah.
And it's like just listening in response in affliction. And if we have people who are being, and I mean, again, how much destruction is happening in Gaza, whereby even those who think that the real estate boom will be something will find that that boom cannot truly exist because of the destruction that has happened to the land because of the gears of war.
Right.
Like the
Yeah.
land is afflicted, and yet Jeremiah stakes his hope there.
Mm.
And that's an absurdity. Why do people love the land? Why do they fight for their homes? Why do they stay there? Why does Jeremiah buy? Why did we talk about the soil from which we came as meaning something? Why do we have to have a way of looking at what is happening to people in the Middle East right now, in that Gaza Strip, who are going? I mean, it breaks. If it doesn't break your heart, and there are people whose hearts aren't breaking, so I should watch what I say because I have no.
Odds
But
are
the very
they're not listening to this.
That's true. That's true. No one's like, "Hey, Green Lectionary podcast. That sounds great. I'm sure that goes along with my desire for greed and obnoxious destruction." Yeah, yeah, amen to that. But this is the same place. What the Babylonians were doing to Judah right then, what the Assyrians had done to Israel 2, 3 generations before, is now what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians. And but that's what happens whenever we grab power over somebody else. I mean, Zedekiah is trying to hold his power over Jeremiah. Nebuchadnezzar's trying to hold his power over Zedekiah. And Jeremiah is just there called the weeping prophet, where he is from the town where it answers prayer or its affliction. All I know is I can't make a field. I can't build a house. I can't live in that land. In a year, I'm going to be carted off to exile with everybody else, and I am never going to see this land again. But there is a memory, a liturgical memory that we still read, an enacted thing where everybody had to witness these deeds, this peace out of the laws of God, where land is passed to a prophet when nobody wants the land, and he shows everybody, shoves it into earthenware, and makes sure that there is a seed from which a future will grow that he will never see. And we now live in enough destruction and despair. I mean, we're the same age. We're that exennial generation, as they say.
Mm-hmm. The Oregon Trail generation.
Yeah, like I had the 6th grade class. I'm substituting, and they use Chromebooks for everything. And I was like, when I was in 6th grade, we went to the computer lab and played Oregon Trail, and they were like, "What's that?" I'm like, it was a very big computer, and it had this disc that you put in, and a minute later you could play. It's and even the Oregon Trail idea. Let's go find more land to take.
Right.
Because that's what so much of our culture has been like. Now, I can say this very easily as my hair. I came from ancestors who were so white that I don't believe the sun came out sometimes. and that British Isles way, and I'm convinced my ancestors and people who lived with my ancestors wanted to take over the world because our food sucked. and I mean, that was the part of it. And so you live on this little island where your major export is wool, and finally you figure out through colonialism and sheer racism that you can just take over the whole world and abuse. This is the Western mindset. And that's a difficult place for Westerners to kind of accept, because we hate to think of ourselves as culturated into destruction. But I think we kind of need to see that. And this is the passage that forces us again to recognize that all of our eschatological talk has been wrong. Like, we do not have an eschatology that considers the groan of creation itself, with still believing, as Paul said, that creation is groaning, awaiting for the very children that will liberate it from its own groaning, that will once again be partners with it, that will recognize from whence it came and not try to take. I mean, we live in a culture now where children want their parents to die so they can get the inheritance and fight with each other over it. I've heard such, like, "Oh God, when is my dad just going to kick the bucket so I can finally get it?" And I know they're saying it, but we have people who actually believe that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and we wonder about, well, what's enough and all these other things, and Jeremiah doesn't answer any of those questions.
Mm-mm.
No, he forces us to just, what kind of liturgical act, what kind of prophetic act, what kind of absurd thing can we do in the face of the powers that be that might make them go, what is happening?
Mm.
But that still just buries a seed. And I mean, the earthenware, it kind of got to me because the moment he puts it in that earthenware like that, and he talks about it for protection, but I can't imagine just how fragile it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, all of the parables of Jesus that talk about seeds as well just kind of started coming to me in these ways that, like, how much hope is a seed
Mm.
that something will come from it, as opposed to, uh, do they still make that seventh generation cleaning products, or was that like
Yeah,
a?
they do, I think. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I liked the idea of the seventh generation cleaning products. Like,
Yeah.
at least, I mean, I don't know how well they moved toward that, but how are we performing, or how is the work we doing ensuring that seven generations from now is still going
Yeah.
to be okay? And which is a
Yeah.
very biblical number, even if it comes
Uh,
from the indigenous cultures of America.
yeah.
And
No.
and again, like, there's something to be said about the notion of Sabbath and all of this as well.
Yeah. So, getting close on time here. Where is there this is ironically um of the passages that we've read for the season of creation. This is ironically because of verse 14 and verse 15. This is the most hopeful of the
Hmm.
Jeremiah passages that we've read. Um, so where is there a call to action for the church here?
I think there's a couple that you can just kind of come right away. If you, and again, you do the call to action as if it's to me, a liturgical act. It's a
Mm,
part of the moment, and prophetic perhaps. I mean, I know that there's forest and landscape restoration that a lot of congregations are doing. Um, Faith organizations are restoring the world's forest initiative. Has documents how churches and mosques and synagogues are managing forests or reforesting landscapes as a part of their stewardship.
mm,
Didn't the G20 Global Land Initiative engage faith groups recently as well?
mm-hmm.
And yeah, like, so, like, mobilized and how to, again, with land restoration targets. I think that's part of it. Plant with a purpose.
Yep.
Like, instead of just doing some things, there's Christian nonprofit work with communities around the world to help heal degraded ecosystems instead of just trying to find something that looks good. Link it to poverty alleviation and environmental restoration. The land is about poverty here as well. The
Mm-hmm.
people have been impoverished. They've lost their livelihoods. They are being destroyed. It's why we need to bring up Gaza just naturally talking about it. And
Mm-hmm.
so there has to be these things where any kind of land restoration always brings about something with regards to the people themselves, poverty alleviation. There's people doing soil work and sustainable agriculture and reforesting. You know these things. I know these things. This is a part where that becomes the seed that we show everybody. We lift up the deeds. We make sure everybody sees it. Um, Restoring Eden is what, I don't know all the. I'm sure you know these things better than I do. Um, but so some contemporary echo things. If I think about it this way, Jeremiah buys land while Jerusalem is besieged and hope is collapsed, and there are faith groups that restore forest in regions facing climate collapse, drought, and desertification. So even when the siege from industry and climate is coming from all around, there are people of faith who are already doing what Jeremiah did in the face of the siege of Jerusalem. It shows that prophetic action isn't after victory, but it's in the midst of crisis. And I think that's important because so many of us are freaking out over what we think is the inevitable collapse. And it might very well be, but we aren't here to prophesy about action after a victory. We are here to do so in the midst of crisis. So we cannot allow our listeners to wait for perfect conditions to act. The storing of the deeds in the clay jars, again, the seed banks, you can talk about these, they're everywhere. Heritage Growers is, in California, Northern California, where I had lived before, have all these kind of things. There's conservation easements. There's protecting land legally. There's these indigenous land restoration projects themselves. These all highlight that same hope that Jeremiah had, that it's tangible, that it's legal, that the material is the preservation, again, is spiritual work. The piece about the land being the covenant partner, though, is I think if we were to slow down, if I were to preach this passage, I would make the land a character in the passage and the main character of the story. Because as Jeremiah is doing this, he is talking about bringing homes back and fields back and vineyards back. It has an image of restored, natural, earthy life as it was intended. And again, we can talk about the projects that restore ecosystems or bring back native species, but we have to remind people, as you picked up on and ran with as well, that there's nothing about the land that is passive. The land has its own flourishing. And our vocation as people who are called by God, who are following this Christ who spoke of, who saw the small things, the flowers in the field, the birds in the air, the things that other people didn't pay any attention to. He brings them back into conversation so that they can have their own flourishing. And that's exactly what Jeremiah is doing. And we cannot have a vocation, a calling, a sense of life that does not have a partnership with the land, because we're earthlings. Like, we're not Martians. We're not, it's like the earth peoples. Like, no, people haven't come from anywhere but the earth, but for some reason we keep thinking that the earth is just some place that we can escape from, as if we actually, like, I am earth and you are earth, and this is a piece about earth. So we have to talk about how our vocation is this partnership with the land at best. Or we, again, I like the more idea of being children of the land than partners with the land even. And then but I think most important, and maybe for so many Americans, is because we're so kind of focused on the next thing, like, or so much of what's going on. This is intergenerational hope. And we've reached a point when I'm not sure we can stop what's coming. The siege is happening. Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. Ananoth is in ruins. And it might all happen, but we have to still live with this intergenerational hope. And again, faith communities that set up renewable energies, sustainable farming for future generations. And it's not just pointing the finger and talking about these things, but it's like the recognition of the little ways we all live into it, the showing the vision that it is. It lifts perspective beyond the individual or the short term. It ties faith to the responsibility for the future in a way that few passages do so explicitly. And That's what yeah, off the top of my head.
No, that's great. I I think that there is a this is not a fatalism, but this is a recognition that we are in a storm that is going to um, last beyond our lifetimes, and we have to set things up for the future that we want to see.
Mm.
I have heard this said, and I have used this phrase. I used it in a sermon a couple weeks ago. That we have to start the process now of being good ancestors, and that's what this is about. This is about Jeremiah being a good ancestor to the people who will one day reclaim this land, who will one day come back to this land and find it and put houses and fields and vineyards on it. The call here is for us to begin to think not just about how do we keep our church alive for the next 3 years? How do we pay our staff for the next 3 years? How do we how do we make budget for, this fiscal year? It's what are we planting for the generation and generations that are going to come after us?
Hmm.
Because that's how we always should have been thinking, and it's time to reclaim that we are borrowing this world to the extent that we own it. We are borrowing this world from our children and our grandchildren. Um, and so there's a call here to be in a faithful, hopeful way, future oriented for a future that we might not see. And that is a
Real
challenge.
eschatology.
That is
I had
real
to interrupt.
eschatology. No, you're absolutely right. That's what real eschatology is. That's what real end times thinking is. It's investing in the future that you won't see.
Oh, that's beautiful, Derek. I love that. Be the
We,
ancestors.
yeah,
It's not a pie in the sky eschatology. It's the seed in the ground eschatology, and that is God's promise that this land will live again.
yeah,
And we need that promise, and we need to live into that promise, even as we get to see that it's not. Yeah, you're right. I'm not going to see it, and I'm well aware of that now. But I have to hold on to the hope. And isn't that what Jeremiah is doing? And even if you
exactly.
have to weep and hope.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Hey,
is.
thank you for this.
Dude, thank you.
This is a rich conversation. Jeremiah gave us a lot to work with for the season of creation, and I'm grateful for your reflection on this. I knew that I knew that you were the right person to you were the right call. That's why I was willing to reschedule and schedule it. Well, I'm
I'm
willing
so
to
glad you kept working with me, man.
willing to do the time zone dance and the PM AM dance.
Thank you for joining us for the Green Lectionary Podcast. This episode was produced by Sprocket Wagner, and the music was provided by Christian McIver. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and help us spread the word for a good review. You can support this and other programs of Creation Justice Ministries at creationjustice.org/donate. And you can follow us on Instagram at green_lectionary.
Our story comes alive within these pages, for every time and place throughout the ages. God speaks and is heard, and the enduring word calls us to care for our world as we share the love that can set creation free. Restoring the earth to wholeness, peace, and harmony. Let the songs of the water, land, and sky resound, 'cause together we're all bound within these pages. There's always new life to be found.